Oh, yes. We'll do the next Kinnot. Sometimes it's a Kinnot we skip, but I just want to share a short thought on Kinnot Yud Beis. Aliyah Asher Ta'avta. Aliyah Asher Ta'avta is on page 188 in the art scroll. If you have it, if you have the OU Kinnot, the current one, it's on page 301. This Kinnot is about the structure of the Kinnot. Is the first line is something very, very powerful about the Beis Hamikdash. Asher Ta'avta Shalom Bereishas Akise Kavah L'Tzarfo. You planned it for a creation. You elevated the almost. You can read through it. Each line is about something powerful about the Beis Hamikdash, and the second line is what's happened to the Beis Hamikdash now. Right. So the second line is Lama Netzach Shudad Biyad Shodadim. How could you let it be ravaged by pirates in Galus? And the general theme is that the Beis Hamikdash was so important and created for the world. How could it be that it's destroyed now? The Kinnot talks about the loneliness. What we call the Shechinta Bigalusa, the idea that God feels lonely. The Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, writes, not only the Jews who are not admitted to the Beis Hamikdash, even Hashem himself is not admitted. Not only are we homeless and dislocated, but he is like a lonely bird without a nest on a cold, stormy, bleak day on a nasty autumn night. She looks for a place to rest for a while, but she has no rest. She feels completely displaced. She's looking for shelter. When a bird looks for a place to rest, she finds it on a very high roof where she cannot be seen. For if she could be seen, someone would chase her away. That's what your status in the world. That's what Hashem is without the Beis Hamikdash. He's this lonely bird. And I really just want to share one idea about the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara tells us a debate about which way the Kruvim faced. I heard this idea from my Kruvim, right? Either did they face each other? Some Sukkim say that they face away. So we know the Gemara says when they're osim ritzon el shel makom, God and law and getting along with each other with God, they face each other. When they weren't doing the will of God, they faced away. Great, but the Gemara says in Yuma that when they entered the Beis Hamikdash, when the Romans, when the Babylonians entered the Beis Hamikdash, they found the Kruvim embraced with each other, not facing each other, embraced. How could that be? The Rishonim are all bothered by this question. The Ritva's bothered by this. How could that be? If, when we're not doing the will of God, we face away from each other, if the Beis Hamikdash is being destroyed, we should be like on opposite ends of the street at this point. Not only are they not just facing each other, they're embraced. So there's a lot of answers. There's the answer of the Yaros Devash, of Yonas and Eibshitz, that it was the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed on Shabbos and the power of Shabbos. Could be. So let me share with you an answer from the Belzer Rebbe, the current Belzer Rebbe. Someone came to the Belzer Rebbe and gave the Rebbe some bad news that somebody had just been killed, unfortunately, in a terrorist attack. And said the Belzer Rebbe, the guy said somebody not from our shtibel, not an aminus, whatever, somebody not from our community, but somebody was just killed in a terrorist attack. So the Rebbe said, you gave me another key. I don't need any more keys. So this guy doesn't follow up with the Rebbe, but somebody else asked the Rebbe, what's that mean? What does it mean you don't need any more keys? So the Rebbe said that we have a way of building up, we build gates. Right? This gate's for me, this gate's for your community, I have a gate for my shul, you have a gate for your school. We all have our gates. When we hear the news that a Jew is killed, so it breaks down the gates. Says the Rebbe, why were the Kruvim facing each other? Because when the Babylonians marched in and they're making all of these jokes about the Kruvim, at that moment, that breach that united the Jewish people. It's often in moments of tragedy that we feel this deep, deep connection to each other. So yes, the Kruvim weren't just facing each other, they were embraced. Rabbi Soloveitchik used to tell a story that once the Rav went to a Farbrengen. It was the Lubavitch Rebbe's 80th birthday. So he had come, the Rav and the Rebbe have a relationship. So he had come to honor the Rebbe. And on the way home, the Rebbe commented that there was one thing which he did not agree with that the Rebbe said. Because when it was there, when the Rebbe offered the Rav L'chaim, the Rebbe said, now the descendants of Rav Chaim Volozhin and the Baal Tanya are finally coming together. So the Lubavitch Rebbe was referring to a split between these two great families and their followers who still today don't get along. One became more Hasidish, one more Misnagdish, one more scholarly, one more, mystical, so to speak. So the Rebbe said, when we share a L'chaim, we've mended that, when you from Brisk and me from the Baal Tanya, Achdus. So the Rebbe says, I don't agree. I'm sorry, the Rav says he doesn't agree. The Rebbe is too complicated. Soloveitchik said he didn't agree. Why? Because he said we came together earlier. And when Hitler put the followers of Hasidim and the followers of Misnagdim in the same gas chambers, it was then that we realized there was no difference between one Jew and another. And that's why the Kruvim are embraced in the Beis Hamikdash when the Babylonians came in. We feel a sense of connection. Kinnot Yud Beis Al Yasher Tahavta. For the interest of time, I was going to do the next Kinnot of Yud Gimel, but I think we're going to skip it this year. We're going to skip ahead a few Kinnos to Kinnot Tes Zayin, Kinnot number 16, which can be found in the art scroll on page 226. I would like to spend just a few minutes on a very, very important Kinnot, and actually to talk about two moments in Jewish history through this Kinnot. So this Kinnot is there's a lot to do in this Kinnot. But number one is you can just read, it's about what Titus HaRasha does, about the horrible things that Titus HaRasha does inside the Beis HaMikdash. Zachar es asher tsar b'fnim shel acharbo l'fnai v'lefnim. He took out his sword. The second verse, Vayim damim kav b'mare adam dam. He slapped the paroches, and he feels, so to speak, that he had chained up God. And it's such a paradox, right? Here it is, Titus is ravaging the holy place of the world, and God himself feels that he's in chains. Of course, Hashem gets back at Titus, because Titus on the way back, he's taking all the spoils. And he's at sea, and there's a big storm, and Titus says to God, God, that's all you got? All you got is water. You're so good at water. Mabel was a thing called a gnat. A lot in this Kinnot about youth, about the Romans, the Nazis, the Crusaders. They targeted children, something about their purity, about being the next in the line in the Mesorah. And there's a story in this Kinnot about the 400 boys and girls. there is the story about the 400 boys and girls that are on the boat. They're being brought back to Rome, and they say, what happened if we jump off, if we commit suicide? Will we get all them haba? And they're darshaning on the boat. Are we going to get it? Is it going to help? And the pasuk says, they quote a pasuk that Hashem v'Hashem Ashem mimitzulas yam, will be safe from the river. So they said yes. So they jump in. The girls jump in, and the boys said, in 1 second, if the girls, who if whatever they'd be taking back for would be at least be permitted in halacha, for whatever they're going to be defiled through, us as boys, we have to jump in. And they jump in. They jump into the sea. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says that don't have to look far into history to realize that what's happening here is happened 60 years ago, 70 years ago. How when they realized their fate, they jumped into the sea. It's important when we talk about this Kinnot. We talk about this Kinnot to remember the youth. You know, whether that's the youth, the three boys, Gilad, the Yal, and Naphtali, Kobi Mendel, Hallel, Yafet, Ariel, who I shared about last night. Talked a little bit last night, just mentioned youth, the Kayla Mayer, and it's hard to, but other tragedy that we talk about, that we actually talk about in this Kinnot. And I want to do it, I mentioned it before about Yeshiva Merkaz Harav. In Yeshiva Merkaz Harav, we're in the library, in the base medrash. It's this Kinnot that we also reference a tragedy that we don't have a Kinnot for. We do it in this Kinnot, and that's this destruction of the Jews in Tach V'Tat. In other years, I've skipped over this, or we briefly mentioned it, but Tach V'Tat was a terrible tragedy, which is 1648 and 1649. In the 1630s, a series of Cossack uprisings in the Ukraine sparked a wave of unrest really throughout most of Eastern Europe. And the Cossacks were like warlike descendants, and they started this little rebellion. And in 1648, they rose. Their leader among the Cossacks' name was Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who unified a band of serfs, criminals, anybody really, into a devastating force. And they basically blamed the Jews. They blamed the Jews because of a misrepresentation of wealth that obviously wasn't the Jews' fault, but whenever you have a great moment, whenever Jews feel comfortable in a country, that's usually when they're going to be cut down. The Shach, the great Rav Shach, not Rav Shach, the Shach, who lived in the 1600s, 1661 to 1621 to 1662. The Shach, who you can't learn Yoredeya, you can't become a rabbi and learn kashrus without the Shach, okay? Lived 41 years. But he lives through this, and he's actually injured. He's injured. He writes about he has a diary about what happens. But Rabbi Yom Tov Lippman Heller, who was known as the Tosfos Yom Tov, he's not just a rabbi. He's on the commentary to the Mishnah. Nothing happened. Right now, he didn't get an answer like today. Every time there's a tragedy, it was a mixed answer. There was a this. All right, that's crazy. He asked in a she'elas shalom, in a dream. He asked, why did this happen? And the answer he got, and I'm not making this up. The answer he got was talking in shul. This is 1640, 1649 is, I don't know, what is that, 350 years ago, right? Whatever. Hundreds of years ago. I guess no one else is doing math either, so whatever. That many years ago. And he wrote a Misha Beirach. He wrote a Misha Beirach because already in his time there was an issue. We shouldn't talk that Hashem will be called Torah v'tzukom and go machala. We should add this on Shabbos. I mean, we want more. And you should get all the brachos that are in the Torah of Chol Sefrei HaNeviim HaKsuvim. Yishabanim Chaim v'Kaim v'Gadim the Torah Chol Masim Tovim. And you should be a good Eved Hashem. V'no Maramei. Gabai Beis HaKnesses Mizvakshim Lehaneg Amiras. You should say this on Shabbos for Musaf. This is 16 whatever. Whenever he wrote it, I think not that many years later. We talked on Shavuos at the shul about the role of the shul of community. about a Beis Hamikdash, and about how we created this mini Beis HaKnesses, mini Beis Hamikdash, really, and that a shul is somewhere where we go to find God. That Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote, the Beis Hamikdash is God does not need a home, but the shul is where we make our home, right? It's something where we call to God. And what's fascinating throughout Jewish history is that it's that notion of the shul that has so bothered our enemies. Obviously, we need to work on talking in shul, but already we have, from the times of the Crusades, we have attacks on shuls. The Edward Flannery, who was a great historian, who wrote a book called The Anguish of the Jews, he actually tells that he's a Jesuit priest in New York City, and the couple is walking and they see a cross over a big church and they like shudder. Bother you so much? He just. So they said that how much blood has been shed by that symbol, and he says, I didn't realize. And he goes back and he studies Jewish history, and he realizes, oh my gosh, look at what's happened. And he tells how even in the Crusades, shuls were targeted. Kristallnacht. Okay, in Kristallnacht, one of the things that they targeted was shuls. When the violence ended after Kristallnacht, they had destroyed 267 shuls and made the Jews pay for it. We have in the Holocaust, there was a book called Kiddush Hashem. It is by a man named Shimon Huberband. It's one of the important works on historical works on the Holocaust. And he tells about all of these different stories, about a whole chapter in this book dedicated to the destruction of synagogues, of shuls. He tells stories how the Germans would come in into the Pietrikov synagogue, which is from where Rabbi Lau, his father, was the rabbi. How they took out all of the Torah scrolls and they left them. They took out all the Torahs. They built a wall around them so nobody could get them, and they would let them rot. And how some Jews actually secretly dug underneath to like save them. But he tells stories about in September of '39 how they ordered all the Jews to stand around and watch as the shul was being burnt. This is all about destruction. I mean, time is running out, so I'm not going to share these stories. But we have in the Soviet Union, he talks here in his book, and then in the Soviet Union, all the religious groups were permitted a central building, right? Whatever religion you were, Islam, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, you got a building. But when it came to the Jews, other faiths could also use any language they want, but you couldn't use Hebrew, you couldn't have a shul. They would watch the shuls. They would make sure what was happening in there. They could barely get a yeshiva started. And the maximum number of students was 14. Okay, so that's what this Kinnot is about. This Kreis Asher Tsar Bifnim is about the role of the shul. How much do we, and I'm not just a rabbi saying, oh, I'm speaking to myself also, we struggle with it. Not just through talking, but kavod beis hakneses. How do we have proper kavod beis hakneses? How do we deal with the shul? How do we, I mentioned on Shavuos, the crisis that Chazal went into when they realized that they wouldn't have a Beis Hamikdash, so they created a shul. A shul is created like a Beis Hamikdash. That's why Bima's in the middle. That's why the Aron is equidistant from the right side of the shul to the left side of the shul. Don't measure it. It is, I don't know about other shuls, but here it is. Right? That's why you have a Ner Tamid. That's why you have all of these things where Chazal said if either we could create something new, a new service, a new worship, or we could create exactly, that's Shemona Esrei is created to all of these things. The build up to Shema, or Schwab writes, is the build up to getting into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There were 3 steps you had to get into before you got to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Psukkah Zimra, Brachos, Psukkah Zimra, Berachos Kriya, Shemona Esrei. You walked into the Beis Hamikdash, right? That's why when you take 3 steps back, it's 3 steps out until you get to where you were halachically permitted to go to. That's what we have, and that's what this Kinnot is about. It is about the beauty of the Beis HaKnesses, where those boys were killed in Merkas Harav, where Yontalit Minhela wrote wrote a Mishaberach of davening, of how we have to be more careful, and of what we should do, this Hakaras Harichot, what we should do for our own understanding of the Beis Hamikdash. Read it through. I'll stop as we get to the fifth verse just to share one thought. As you get to the fifth verse, the Kinnot here says, "B'nafshenu tavanu kehotzli kli shares." They took out the vessels. My father fulfilled his lifelong dream. My father always told me, and to tell Titus, you look at where you are and look at where I am. So luckily for my father, my sister. And luckily for my father, my sister's cruise line goes to Costa Rica, goes to, and if anybody sees my sister for the bar mitzvah, you can tell her that I promoted Costa Rica, and I'm sure she'll give you $1 off on your next cruise. So my father went to Rome. He said that was his dream. His dream was to go to the Arch of Tea, to stand underneath it and to say, "Hey, look at where you are." So this is what the Kinnot tells us here. You took out these the vessels. You put them on the ships, right? It's the arch. There are many arches. A Roman general, when he destroyed a nation or a country, would take the spoils and the loot back and build an arch based on there's fascinating stuff about what the menorah looks like in the Arch of Titus, what the menorah looks like in the Beis Hamikdash. For a separate discussion, the emblem of the land of the state of Israel is. The emblem, not the flag. The emblem of the state of Israel is that menorah that was taken from the Arch of Titus. Doesn't look like the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash because they wanted to say, you tried to kick us out, so now we're back in. So, and look at the last line of this verse. We couldn't find the 93 vessels. I want to briefly touch upon something. I mentioned the story many years ago. A story about the 93 Beis Yaakov girls. There was a famous story that was written up in the New York Times right when it happened. About 93 Beis Yaakov girls who wrote this letter about how they committed suicide during the Holocaust. They wanted to get their lives. I told the story. You can Google it. And there's a lot of discussion as to whether the story actually happened, whether it was fictional, legendary, to match up. But I want to share some of the ideas of this story and how it connects. First of all, where did they get the 93? 93 comes from 3 vessels that they couldn't find. This idea of 93 is very important. That's why the author of this article, most likely this story doesn't really happen. They don't really send this letter, but the story is out there. You can find it. You can see the article. I have the article from the Times in 1933 telling the story about these 93 girls. But why did the author of this article write? Because this idea of Molatza Tishim Shosha Klishares. And not just that, you find also that the Balakina sticks it in. He talks about this idea in a Kinnot about how Titus did terrible things. We just talked about how the girls were going to be used for terrible things. And now all of a sudden we hear about this idea. So the Rav said that this 93 utensils, that after Titus plundered the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, they couldn't find certain things. They couldn't find these 93 vessels, and that's this reference. It's also possible that the Kohen Gadol could have been unaware that the destruction was even taking place. It could be that this author of this article to the New York Times is screaming to American Jewry. Do you see what maybe the Kohen Gadol didn't even search for the 93? I don't know. He didn't take into account. He doesn't know that they're missing. And how are we as American Jewry watching as in the 1940s as these girls are killing them, getting killed? Or what are we doing? That's also possible. That's what this story is from. And the letter is dated. I will tell you when the letter is dated. The letter is dated in August 11th, 1942. Yet the events speak of an event on July 27th, 1942. In other words, the letter is written, obviously, a few weeks after Tisha B'Av. Meaning, but the event itself happened right after Tisha B'Av. It's very clear that what the author of the letter is trying to do is saying, let me give you an update on Lezer HaKalir's 93. There were 93 vessels missing, and there's 93 vessels missing, and we're 2,500 years later. That tragedy is still happening. One of the goals of Kinnot, of Lezer HaKalir, is not to sleep through destruction, really, not to be, not ignorant, but just empathetic towards it. And maybe what this letter of the 93 girls is telling us is really to wake up to tragedies that are happening around us. I thought about this just personally, about the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash as I read through this. I was given an opportunity in the last 5 months, thanks to Lori Haston, who asked me to get involved, to writing a curriculum for a new exhibit at the Holocaust Museum that just opened Thursday night about objects. It's called Objects of Survival, and it's about objects that have survived ordeals, many from the Holocaust, but from genocides in Rwanda and many others. But obviously a good number from the Holocaust. And it's a new exhibit in the Holocaust Museum. And I got to write with Rabbi Danishevsky, for how to engage them before the lesson, after the visit. And subjects have taken on a new meaning to me, that when I saw this line, it don't just mean objects, it means survival, and it means awakening ourselves to things that keep happening around us and to changes that need to happen. Kinnot Tezai. We're going to continue to the next Kinnot, which is Kinnot Yud Zayin. And this Kinnot, it's perhaps one of the more or most gruesome and horrific of the Kinnos. Here, Lezer HaKalir isn't making stuff up. He's not his imagination. He's using Chazal and Midrashim, but we don't have to go there. If you just read the beginning parts of Tachan Nashim Piryam, Olei Tipuchim, women eating their children, how hungry they were. And Tevashelna Rachmaniyos Yaldehen. The third verse tells us him to goes have the OU Kinos. He actually tells the story. He says that a cousin of his name was Hirschglickson. Mother was the daughter of Chaim Brisk. When the Nazis conquered Warsaw and found him and his wife, it was the first week after their wedding. The Nazis tied him to one automobile, his wife to another, and then drove off at a high speed, which of course resulted in their gruesome deaths. So this Kinnot isn't. It's not something we have to look really far back. The idea in the Kinnot of if you look at the letter Zayin, and Tizamerna Basar Avos Labonim, about encountering their parents and the parents giving away their children. And the Kinnot talks about the death of the children, this idea of Tisha Kabin Mochen Yode Manichem, this measures of the crushed brains. I'm going to share this, though, this year, a very different approach to this Kinnot. The woman, her name is Chana Chaitan. There is a book by Moshe Prager where he documents aspects of the Holocaust that in the 1950s that he thought that no one thought to do. He gathered poems and songs written by victims or survivors. Some poems that were in ghettos, some in concentration camps, on the run, in the forest. It's called Min HaMeitzar Karasi. It's published from Masada Rav Kook. And in the times of the Churban, there is this more documentation of cannibalism. We do have shalos and shuvas in the Holocaust. For example, Shulev Aronson has a shuva about cannibalism. Unfortunately, this is what the Kinnot is. Could they eat the dead? And he basically says a halachically would be okay, and let's not show the Nazis, and eventually they don't, and they're liberated the next day. But there's more cannibalism issues in the times of Yirmiyah Hanavi. But her poem, she has a different approach to this idea of her child. And I want to read a little bit. It's obviously written in Yiddish. I won't even attempt. So I'm going to read you the Hebrew translation, which Masada Rav Kook has. And her title is called the Kfar Litakat, in a little Litvisha town. And it's about a boy who's surrounded with long hair, with payas, little girls whose hair locks are golden, and that's her boy. The girls whose hair locks are golden are a representation of the non-Jews. And among this is one little kid with the black eye, and that's the Jewish kid. And this child is brought to a home that's not his, whether it's a monastery, a non-Jewish home. And it tells us that he has fasayim lo rak lenashkan, he has lips that are beautiful to kiss. Shchar taltalim harosh tukan, these beautiful payas. Hevi'atu lakan ha'im, someone brought him here. Mu'utaf, wrapped up. Nishtaku v'lila, in the middle of the night. Mehayom tells us, Yaldi zemikomcha. The mother tells him, now this is your home. Zachar, zachar divrei imecha. Remember what your mother is going to tell you. Ani oscha po machbia. I'm going into hiding. Ki sakana lechorava. It's too dangerous for us. Im yeladim isachak yafeh. Play with these children. Shokat umushma tihiyah. Be very careful what you say. Lo taflit mila Yehudis. Don't speak not Hebrew. Don't speak your mama lashon. Don't speak Yiddish. Ki mehayom yaldi. From now on, my child, ein cha Yehudi. You're not a Jew. Hayelad hischanei v'chi. The child cries. Itchech lios rotzeh. I just want to be with you. Al tanichini ima po levad. Stay here, mama. Bacha hayeled v'ra'ad. He trembles and he cries. Nifticho harbed devarim. She promised him over and over again, to no avail. Tzavach v'ra'ad. He cries and he cries. Eini rotze lios levad. I don't want to be alone. Ruach shel tzina noshev. There's this wind, a cold wind, bachutz, that comes in. Avo yaldi bidei zarim oso zonachti. I have to leave you. Achaim bereira acheres lihayasa. What other avenue do I have? Bachoshech eim mishotita. She wanders at night. She sings him a lullaby. She goes off into the night. I give him a Polish name, but it's strange to him. His heart is he's stifled. He's verklempt. And the mother feels his pain, and she's never consoled. And that's really, this Kinnot is about the children, this separation. That's what this Kinnot is about. It's about the separation, not only just in this horrific cannibalistic terms, but in the mothers through the times of the Crusades, as we'll share shortly, to all these persecutions, to kids in monasteries. And yes, we know the stories. The Shema Yisrael, the Adimamins, they came back. Not everybody came back. There were many stories of those who didn't come back. There have been fights in court over Jews who were left in monasteries, and when told and shown they were Jewish, didn't want to come back, and there were fights. And many of those court cases did not win in favor of Jews. And that's what this Kinnot is about. Jews that have been given over, that have been torn from their parents at those terrible moments. Kinnot Yud Zayin. The next two Kinnots are really a package. So we will do really Kinnot 19, but I'm going to share just a thought about 18 first. If you look at Kinnot Yud Ches, Kinnot 18, the structure to this Kinnot is about really all the things that Hashem has promised us. And why, again, more of asking questions. Vata, Amarta, this idea of you said it would be good. You assured us. The structure has been poured upon us. Look at the fourth verse. The nations. But now, every verse is split into those two sections. What you promised and what's happening. And it's very important in this Kinnot to understand this idea of questioning. Questioning is okay. I want to talk for a minute about questioning. Last year on Tisha B'Av and yesterday briefly at a shir that I gave on empathy, I talked about Malki Klein, the tragic story of a girl who was thrown from one school to the next, never getting in. Eventually, her life took her own life in an overdose, and how a masterful, powerful, profound poem that was written. I want to add one piece to that conversation. And it comes from Judge Ruchi Fryer. If you never heard of her, you should hear of her. She's a Hasidic woman, and she was just elected to the civil court in New York. She's a judge. She's a judge, a civil court judge. Grew up Hasidic, still Hasidic, and she wrote the following. She said that she used to work on a program called B'derech, which helped adolescent youth and risk, primarily boys within the Hasidic community. And she actually had conversations with Malki Klein before in the years leading up to her, through all of her issues, she had conversations with her. So Ruchi Fryer says, I grew up in the 1970s, the 1980s, a generation that proved Hitler was wrong. Generation of the grandchildren, Holocaust survivors, children of survivors. It was the era of the Baal Shula movement. Shlomo Carlebach, Rebbetzin Youngreis, who would reach out to the multiple people who were coming home. We would hear on the radio of songs of Balei Tshuva, about Shabbos, Hanukkah candles. I had classmates from a variety of backgrounds. Some girls who were parents, some who were from birth. No one's parents ever called the school to complain or have them expelled. Today, most of my classmates, including the weaker students, are married with children in our community. Nobody I knew then used the term off the derech. It did not exist in our community. Nobody I knew left Yiddishkeit. Something changed in the 1990s. We thought we knew better than our parents. We're going to bring Torah to a level of unsurpassed excellence. We heralded the advent of the Mitsuyanim, yeshivas in schools with higher standards. Disenfranchised many students who could not keep up. Thus began the churban of our generation. The rejection of so many innocent children left behind, hurt and destroyed. She writes that some people compare this off the derech movement to the Haskalah of the 18th century, right? That turned Jews away with, secularism. But there's a huge distinction between those who we lost to the Haskalah and those we lost to the off the derech movement. The Jews who lost to the Haskalah were beckoned by the outside world. Here, the broken souls who are leaving the fold to join the off the derech are expelled by us. They're given the message that they will pay if I make a proclamation that all shuls should close. We'll have one shul for all Jews. He'll build it. I said, I don't agree with that. I don't agree there has to be one shul for all Jews. It's okay to have differences. It's okay. It's better. There's no such thing as uniformity. There's something called unity, which is being different but understanding each other. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of one school. But there is creeping into our system today this hierarchy of I'm firmer than thou, and my approach is better. And she said that I recently spoke to a group of high school principals from Borough Park, right, and urged them to accept that students may be different and recognize that not every student will fit into one-size-fits-all box, which our system has evolved into. I'm sure you all have your own stories. I'm sure we could go around the room and spend from today and through next Tisha B'Av with our own stories about these issues. But she had this conference with Borough Park principals. I explained that I was the average student and I had questions. That's what this Kinnot is about. Lama. I had questions all the way through high school and seminary. My Beis Yaakov teachers, many who were students of Sarah Schneer, were patient and answered all of my questions. By the time I graduated Beis Yaakov, I had the answers. I knew that what was expected of me, a few weeks after my lecture, one of the principals met me, and in the front of a group of women made a point of telling me she disagreed with what I had said and walked out of the room to display her rejection of my hashkafos. You should just know that, by the way. Don't ever think I don't know when you walk out, okay? So just leave it at that. She also told me to tell, she also made sure to tell the Hanhola of my infraction. So not only did she tell Judge Ruchi Fryer that she was wrong, she went and then told the Hanhola of her school what Ruchi Fryer had just said, as if Ruchi Fryer was the enemy number one in the Jewish Orthodox movement, the Hasidic movement. When I questioned what would bother her, she explained we cannot encourage questions from students, and that our derech is to keep students in a box without allowing creativity or thought. Now it was my turn to be rejected and publicly humiliated by a high school principal. But I am neither vulnerable nor adolescent. And with a confident smile, I told the principal that we have to agree to disagree, but still be friends. It's okay to ask questions. Now, this Kinnot is about asking questions. It's important to allow our students to ask questions. You know, I encourage that with my own students. I know I have a question and answer sessions with them, and sometimes my students will ask me things, and I'll say, I don't know. They go, you don't know? You're a rabbi. So sometimes a very powerful answer is, I don't know. But I want to share a different approach, because I think for the most part, I don't know, I know this recording is working, and I don't think the webcam is working, but for us in this room, I don't know how many kids or grandkids or friends are like, telling us, or we're not letting them into schools. I don't know. We're not the administrators, but we all suffer from this ailment. I remember I had a conversation. I was learning with the kid. I won't say when, and I won't say I was learning with the kid about Hilchos Shabbos, and the parents and whatever. Even in school, when I learn Hilchos Shabbos, I try to tell my students that obviously not every home might do what I'm going to tell you, but you should know that this is what we strive to do. Parent comes to me and tells me after I learn with this kid that my son is coming and telling me all these things you're learning with him about Hilchos Shabbos. We're fine. I took a course. I went to a mini web series, whatever it was. I know all, so he doesn't have to tell us anything. So we also reject questions. We might not reject him I'm not letting this kid into my school. But how many times do we hear something and we realize, oh, I don't know, maybe that sounds right, or maybe I should do that, but I'm going to reject the question, because I reject the question, it doesn't have to enter into my heart. So it's not just what Ruchi Fryer is saying. That's an issue. That is a major issue. This idea, I can't tell you, thank God we don't suffer it so much in Chicago. But there are certain communities who every slice of orthodoxy, of Haredi, of this or that, has and to the left, has now their own school. Because if I can't only teach what I want to who I want and how I want, well, what's the point? And in not letting anybody else into my school of thought is very bad. It's very bad that we become very homogeneous. It's true in Haredism. It's true in modern Orthodoxy. Look what we have today. We personalize everything we want in our lives. My playlist, my news source. I don't have to listen to news I don't like to, commentators I don't like to. I could do a Fox News, I could do CNN, I could do MSNBC, and I don't have to listen to anybody I don't like to, and I'll just keep being fed the things that I like, and that is true in Orthodoxy. I kept being fed things that I like to hear. And when somebody comes in that I don't like to hear, whether it's how I judge somebody or what I do, I say no, because in my little flavor that I've created for myself, but that comes from not being, when we ask questions, we become vulnerable, we grow. So it's not just questions in faith. I remember, it's not even a year ago, about a month after Caleb passed away, I sat down with about a group of 15 high school students late one night, and I spoke to a mental health professional earlier that day just to give me some guidance. And a lot of my conversation was, we don't know. I have no idea. But I told them, it's amazing. It's good to ask these questions. It's good to say, lama, lama, lama. It's good to ask those questions. It's good to ask those questions. So it's true in those kind of moments, and it's true in any time we get something that we're not comfortable with. How open are we to accepting that kind of question? But we're actually going to go to Kinnot number 19. We're not reading 18 inside, because Kinnot 19 is an important Kinnot, and that is the Kinnot about Tziduk Hadin. The idea of Tziduk Hadin, of this idea of righteousness, of Tziduk Hadin doesn't mean surrender. It sort of means that I'm comforted in my trust of Hashem. And if you look throughout the whole Kinnot, the whole way this Kinnot is presented is there's the first line of Hashem Atzdaka, that Hashem, did so and so, that it's posed sort of 11 questions. And there's immediately with an answer, how can Hashem do this? But Hashem is always righteous. You look through all of these Kinnos, you look through verse number 3, verse number 4 is about the Egel, but we trust that whatever God does is always righteous. Elie Wiesel, when talking about Tziduk Hadin, Elie Wiesel, obviously, who survived and saw the worst of the worst. We're familiar maybe with the medrash that Elie Wiesel, who famously says that they wanted to put God on trial, or the famous play where they put God on trial, and yet as they're doing it, what do they do beforehand? They daven Mariv. But daven Mariv, and then we're going to put God on trial, right? So Elie Wiesel, who first the medrash talks about that Rabbi Kiva, Moshe Rabbeinu was shown Rabbi Kiva's flesh, how it's being ripped off, and Moshe says, the Zu Torah Zu Schara, this is the reward for Torah. And the answer to Moshe is quiet, like enough. So Elie Wiesel says that doesn't weaken Moshe's faith. On the contrary, it strengthens his faith. But says Elie Wiesel, I'll read for you, but in order to prosecute God, we must believe that God is there, that God is inherently benevolent. Without those two fundamental assumptions, the question cannot be asked at all. In the very demand of an explanation, we affirm our trust in God and in his goodness. This idea of Elie Wiesel, in fact, he tells that he learned this when he met the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They had a conversation about crying for the Holocaust. Elie Wiesel said that this was a turning point in his writings. That Elie Wiesel went on to write many things, books on biblical fire, I forgot what it's called, but it's about his writings on like Hasidus. And he appreciated that however broken his broken emunah is what got him to have emunah. He said, I never renounced my faith in God. I've risen against his justice. I protested his silence and some of his absence. But my anger rose within my faith and not outside it. it's good to question. And often our faith, when we do all these other things, like keep mitzvos and learn Torah and be a good Jew, our faith is, when we're struck with tragedy, is reaffirmed. We don't know, we can't give an answer for something, but we have to accept that the pain of faith is part of faith. And in fact, Elie Wiesel wrote an Ani Maamin that I'll share with you here. I believe Avraham, despite Treblinka. It's titled the Ani Maamin, 1973. Ani Maamin, a song lost and found again. I believe Isaac because of Belzin. I believe Yaakov because and in spite of Maidanek. Dead in vain, dead for naught. I believe. Pray man, pray to God, against God, for God. But I believe. Whether Mashiach comes, I believe. Or is late in coming, I believe. Whether God is silent or weeps, I believe. I believe for him, I believe in spite of him, I believe in you, even against your will, even if you punish me for believing in you. Blessed are the fools who shout their faith. Blessed are the fools who go on laughing, who mock the man who mocks the Jew, who helps their brothers, singing over and over and over, I believe in the coming of Mashiach, and though he tarries, I wait daily for his coming, I believe. Kinnot Yutes. We're already running out of time, so we're going to skip Kinnot. We're going to conquer the Jews. The Romans thought they first will just destroy the Beis Hamikdash. Then that's Tito's Achar Esa Shir Tsar Bifnim. Then Bar Kochba revolt comes along, and the Romans are realized that it's not just the Beis Hamikdash, but it's the leaders, it's the teachers. So they put in various religious restrictions. And then they kill the 10 martyrs. It's important to know, obviously historically, that these 10 martyrs didn't live at the same time. They were all killed by the Romans. They were killed, but they did not live at the same time. Number one, we should recognize that all those that have died al Kiddush Hashem, those that have just mentioned, the soldier, unfortunately, in Israel, the famous story goes that a student once met Rav Shlomo Zalman and asked Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, "Can I leave yeshiva to go daven by the Kivrei Tzadikim?" So Shlomo Zalman says, "Better you should stay in yeshiva and you should learn." Yeah, is there a time that I could go visit Kivrei Tzadikim? So doesn't Rav Shlomo Zalman go? I've seen the Rav Shlomo Zalman go. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, yes, if I want to go pay by the Kivrei Tzadikim, I go. I don't go to the Galil, I go to Tzfat. When I feel the need to go to Kivrei Tzadikim, I go to Har Herzl. I go to Har Herzl, where the soldiers are buried. And that's where I daven. That's where I daven by the Kivrei Tzadikim. But I wanna talk for a minute about the idea of Kiddush Hashem. The Holocaust presented a shift in Kiddush Hashem. Usually the idea of Kiddush Hashem is that a person has to give up his life. Right? But in general, if a person is told to fulfill any Aveira, as opposed to one of the big three, idolatry, murder, or illicit relations, then a person does the mitzvah, does the Aveira. Yet in the Holocaust, they were faced for the first time with questions of, can we refuse mitzvos that might end up killing us, but can we refuse? Do this or I'll kill you. They're saying, should we risk a Hanukkah camp? Risk keeping kosher? Because for them, that was how they had the... And what I found in some research, was that many of those that died and passed away and were killed and died al Kiddush Hashem, many used the Asara Haruge Malchus as their model. For example, I'll read for you here from Esther Farbstein's book, Hidden in Thunder. First, he writes from Ari Labin who was taken with his community dressed in a kittel. He said, as before they were about to die, "Dear brothers, we're moving now to the kingdom of heaven. After the terrible suffering and hellish torments we have gone through on earth, you are guaranteed an entry to the Garden of Eden. Don't worry. Go joyfully. Fortunate are you, fortunate are we have the privilege of dying as Jews." That was from the Asar Harugi Malchus of Rabbi Akiva, who died as a Jew. One more story directly related to Rabbi Akiva. Can't find it now. There's a story told here about how many Jews, as they died, looked to Rabbi Akiva's Shema Yisrael, as a source of their Shema, that they felt that they were in some ways reliving the deaths of the great Asar Harugi Malchus. It's important to read through this Kinnot in the English to understand what happened, to understand these stories. The version we have here is shorter than the version on Yom Kippur, because the Yom Kippur version is for tshuva, so we tell more of it. This is just to give us the Velus feel. So Kinnot Chaf Aleph should be read either in the English or the Hebrew, but definitely to understand the stories of the Asar Harugi Malchus. Rabbi Salvation would read this Kinnot. They say he would bawl. Tears were streaming down his face as he would read this Kinnot. Continue reading, but I'm going to go to Kinnot Chav Gimel, which is a story about the children of Yishmael Kohen Gadol. Simple children. And the story is that there was a young daughter and a young son, a middle-aged son, middle to late adolescent of Rabbi Akiva. The son was going to be the next Kohen Gadol. He was already on the Sanhedrin, and their father is killed in the Asar Harugi Malchus. And the children are held captive. The Gemara tells us that the daughter is crying for the Kohen Gadol, and now who knows what's going to be. The son crying, I'm the son, I was going to be the next Kohen Gadol, I don't know who this is, but How could this be? They cried the whole night when the Amon HaShachar, Ikiru Zeh, Zev, Naflu Zeh, Zev, Gob, V'chia, Shiatza Nishma. So they realized who they were, and they cried, they embraced, and they cried until their neshamos left their bodies. That's what Yirmiyahu says, Eila ani bochia, ini yordamai. One of the reasons we read this Kinnot is not just for their faith and bravery, but for the individuals. Part of the Churban is that each person is a story. I mentioned last night briefly the horrific tragedy this past year. Yisrael Levin and his Kala Elisheva Kaplan were killed in a car accident. Drunk driving accident. A few weeks before their wedding. So we'll take this Kinnot, which is about children, take a moment just to share what his father at the Levaya talked about the minhag of the Afikoman. And he said that children take the Afikoman, they guard the whole night, and the father asks for it back. And later, the father asked the child to make sure the matzah is still pure, it didn't become chametz, and before he takes it back. But before he gives it back, the kid says, but I want a gift. So Reb Shaya says, the father of Yisrael Levin says, that he's going to make a request of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 21 years ago, I received a pure matzah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I made sure I received the best chinuch, the best yeshivos, the best friends. Now Hashem wants my matzah back. But I want my afikomen. And Yoel, the father of Yeshua, wants his afikomen too. We did what we were supposed to do. We will give our matzahs back, but I want three things. 10,000 shidduchim in Eretz Yisrael. Not 5,000 for the boys and 5,000 for girls. I want 10,000 for both the boys and the girls. 10,000 for Shalemos. And 10,000 for both the Zecharim and the Nekevos of the boys and the girls. And lastly, I want Siyata Deshmaya. I want Amunah and Bitacha for 10,000 Jews. This Kinnot, as you read through it, should be a Kinnot where we reflect on the individuals, on the children. So many children this past year we've lost. Kinnot Chav Gimel. The second verse says, Al Bein Ubas Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol. Zichram Hashem Yekod Lebilvavi Ashima. Asima. I will cry still over their daughters and son Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol. Their memory is like a fire in my heart. And I will mourn from year to year. I will make sure that they're not forgotten. We have about a half hour, 40 minutes left. We're going to skip the Kinnot Chaf Hey, but if I could ask you just for a second to turn to Kinnot Chaf Dalet, I would just like to point out one note about this Kinnot. The Kinnot begins Chaf Dalet. We're going to skip it this year, but the Kinnot says, the second line is Al Chorban Beis Hamikdash Kihuras V'Chihudash. Upon the Shosh, the Beis Hamikdash that was torn down and trampled. Becheskel Abramsky was a great Dayan. It was in prison in the Soviet Union, prison for many years, eventually becomes the great Dayan in Great Britain. Wrote a sefer called the Chazon Yecheskel and Tosefta. He really wrote this sefer in prison without Sfarim. And is on his coffin in Levaya, they're Malavi with the 12 volumes. But he has a question. If you look at that first line, it doesn't make sense. Because it should say, Al Beis HaMikdash Kihuras V'Chihudash, right? On the Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed and trampled. Not Al Chorban Beis HaMikdash Kihuras V'Chihudash. That's not grammatically correct. It should be on the Beis HaMikdash that it's destroyed, not on the destruction that is destroyed. So he gives I probably should have started with this, a profound answer. He says that the problem isn't just that there's Chorban, it's that the Chorban has been trampled. That we don't Kihuras V'Chihudash. About Moshe Shapiro. You might have heard of Moshe Shapiro. Moshe Shapiro just died last year. Moshe Shapiro lived in Israel, wasn't involved in politics, wasn't involved in, but was a real, I can't call him Hasidus, mystical, but he wasn't fluffy. But his Torah is so deep. He gave a shir every Thursday night, thousands of people. Right, left, Srugi, Streimels, 2 hours long. His stuff is now coming out. It's very deep. And his Torah is all new. He was a very, very special person. Really an original thinker like there hasn't been in a long time. You can buy some of his work. Some of them are translated. I remember when I was in Shalavim, Rabbi Waxman said, "Oh, do you want to come?" He would go every Thursday night. He was very close to him. And I said, "Sure." Within 3.5 seconds, I was lost. No idea what was happening that year. And another hour and 57.5 minutes. But afterwards, I began to learn a little bit more of his works. And a story was told, not even about his learning. He was very concerned with superficiality. And one day, the author of the story was walking to Ramosha. Ramosha took a bus and left him off. He'd walk from the bus stop to his house. So some guy from Ramosha's Kollel, he was a lamdan. Besides being very, very, learned in the worlds of Chassidus and of deeper Torah. So he says the Ramosha is walking from the bus to his house. So this Kollel guy comes over to Ramosha, and he says, I've been thinking about the Shoah. So why was there a Shoah? Why did it happen? So Moshe is quiet and he says, Shalom Aleichem, have a great day. So the other students asked Moshe, why didn't you answer him? So Moshe says, this guy had a window of time from the moment that I got off the bus to my house. I don't know how long it is. It's not that long. Maybe a few minutes. And in those few minutes, he wanted me to explain to him in the broadest, widest, the most painful and profound era that we've witnessed, that I was stunned by his small-mindedness. And in 2 minutes, he's going to ask me, why did it happen? And then Ramosha said something with Ramosha's very sharpness, that to ask such questions with such superficiality, that if we just think about it, but we don't really try to understand it, and we just wave it off, then itself is being trampled upon. Okay, let's go to Kinnot Chav Hey, because I'm going to try to move a little faster as we talk about the Crusades now. The Crusades, this shifts. We're all well aware of the history of the Crusades. That in November 27th of 1095. In Clermont, Pope Urban II issued this decree that for what was supposed to be prepared, systematic, strategized taking of Jerusalem back from the Muslims, the infidels. But unfortunately, as you can read through the Kinnot gives us dates. These mobs decided, why wait till we get to Yerushalayim to kill the enemy? Wonderful. In our backyard are enemies. They're Jews. They're Jews that are enemies right now. That's why we have Avarachamim is written for the Crusades. And this idea of anti-Semitism, I quoted from Edward Flannery before, that why have Jews from time immemorial attracted hostility, inspired fear in almost every age? Why, from the days of Greece and Egypt to present day, have we been the oppression and contempt, Christian, Muslims, rationalist, atheists? The anti-Semite answers promptly that it is clear that the basic root of Jew hate must reside in the Jew himself. In other words, he says the Jew is transcendently hateable. And that was proven to us by the Crusades. The Crusades, as remarked in one of the most famous books called In the Year 1096, the Crusades was a turning point in which left a trail of blood from France to Palestine. The crusading mobs just wiped them out. And, we're running late, so I'm not going to read for you this morning from the Crusade Chronicles. I mean, we have first-hand accounts of this horrific attacks. And what we're experiencing today, the Merkaz Harav, terrorist attacks, Holocaust, persecutions, inquisitions, begins with the Crusades. So I want to shift this year, instead of talking about the Chronicles, to talk about a line from the Kinnot. If you look in the Kinnot, the begins the top of 272. It's in the back. How do I eulogize her? And a few lines down, it talks about Torah, Mikra, Mishnah, Agada. How am I going to mourn? They're torn. Torah, Mishnah, Gemara. A Torah, the Talmud, the Halomda. A Torah, where is the Torah, Talmud? And it's really not, Vilomda means really, it's students. In the OU Kinos, they quote a story about that, a phrase used by a Holocaust survivor to describe the feelings of visiting Vilna on the Kol Nidre night in 1945. Shortly after he was liberated, he returned to Vilna where he lived before the war, before the Yom Narayim. How could he describe what Vilna looked like in Rosh Hashanah before the war? 8, 9 synagogues, the base of the Gra, a synagogue get back to the Middle Ages. The person remembered what the Vilna shul looked like, the neighborhoods where the synagogues were located. And in that Kol Nidre in 1945, he returned to the synagogue where his mother used to pray and it was deserted. And he used the phrase from the Kinnot, where is the Torah and those who study it? Her place is desolate. And the survivor had a haunting story. His mother was a pious Jew and, of course, attended Shul Yom Kippur. When it came time for him after Yonush, she would leave for half an hour, feed her cat, and come back. The cat would wait for her, and after feeding the cat, she returned to Shul. This man who knew the cat spent Yom Kippur 1945 at the home where his parents had lived. At 4:30 in the afternoon, there was a scratching at his door. It was the same cat waiting for him to feed her the way his mother had. This had a traumatic effect. He had felt the magnitude of the Holocaust. This idea, this Kinnot, about a Torah v'halomda. The Torah, what we lost in the Crusades wasn't just the communities. We lost Torah centers. We lost, Spy or Minds. There wasn't just, it was a huge shift now on what we had to regain in Torah learning. The Gemara tells us, the reason that there is a need at some point for another Tishma, we will, or just do a topic. Good. The Gemara says, why was first Beis HaMikdash destroy the first temple? They didn't make a Birchas HaTorah. I mean, come on. That would be like amazing if that was our only problem today. They didn't make a Birchas HaTorah. So it's a difficult Gemara. The Gemara continues. The Gemara explains that they did not really recite. They didn't recite Shem Varchin Bracha Techila. So what does that mean? The idea is that Torah learning, what does it mean they didn't make a bracha? When they didn't make a bracha, it meant because Torah learning was great. They might have learned a lot of Torah, but it didn't penetrate. Now, we make a bracha in the morning when we get up. We make the brachas of Torah. And we all learn a lot of Torah. So let's say you learn before davening, you daven, you go to work, and I don't know, at work, after work, daf yomi, a chumash class, whatever it is, you're going to learn Torah again. Why don't you make a bracha again? If you shook you ate a mizonos, you're going to make a bracha later. That's probably a bad example for Tishma. But you're going to make another bracha later. There's no second bracha on Limud Torah. So Tosa says, because it's a whole day affair. Even when I'm not doing it, I'm doing it. And this idea of la'asok b'divrei Torah, Rabbi Soloveitchik when he talks about la asok b'divrei Torah, Rabbi Soloveitchik talks about the fact that there is what he calls an acute awareness and a latent awareness. For example, he says a mother who plays with her child, that's an acute awareness. I'm playing with you right now. But when you're away and I'm far from you, you're still in my heart. And that's what Torah has to be. Torah has to be this latent awareness. In the Rav, in many places, talks about this relationship with Torah. He says that the Rambam remained my friend even after my childhood. And we're friends to this day. Who talks like that? That the Rambam is my friend. Indeed, there was only one difference between my childhood experience and my presenthood. In my present one. In my childhood, the Rambam was my friend. While at my present study group, my Rambam and the Rabbeinu Tam are kissing me on my forehead and shaking my hand. It's not a fantasy. It's a deep experience. It's the experience of the Torah. Share different thoughts of the Rav. In fact, Rabbi Soloveitchik does write at one point that he had a very traumatic year in which he lost a few relatives, including his wife, that I could not myself have ever endured this past year had I not felt the close proximity of God. I'm not a Kabbalist. I'm not a mystic. So when I speak of the nearness of God, it's real. That God was there putting his hand on my shoulder. That's how I got through my year. This year of mourning for his wife. That's what this Kinnot is about. This Kinnot is about, I remember, yesterday I gave a share about empathy. I didn't quote, there was an article, a woman writes that don't ever, when someone's in an elevator is about to close, say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, as the elevator is closing. Like that doesn't do anybody any good. So I remember I was in the elevator with Rabbi Tendler. Rabbi Tendler, right after, it was his first day back, his wife had died. He'd just gotten up from Shiva, and I was in the first hall in YU. I was going up somewhere, and it was me and Rabbi Tendler, and somebody else came in the elevator. And the person turned to Rabbi Tendler and said to Rabbi Tendler, you should take more time off. Yeah, you don't have to come right back to yeshiva. How old's Rabbi Tendler now? 92, 93. So what? He was in his 80s when his wife passed away. Take off another few days. Come give a shir. Rabbi Tendler, I'll never forget. Rabbi Tendler looked at this person and says, this is the only way that I know how to get through it. That's a Torah v'halomda. The idea of Kinnot shouldn't just be about the Crusade Chronicles. It really should be about something that motivates us in our own la'asok b'divrei. It's not just when my Torah is open, but in my closeness and my love of Torah. Kinnot chafei. and then to Kinnot Lamed Aleph. We're getting close to nearing the end. Actually, I think for the interest of time, maybe we'll just skip Shlif. I'm gonna skip a bit. Lamed Aleph, yeah, 31 at the. It's hard to skip, but I want to keep honest to our time. So in this Kinnot, we'll stand up and we'll sing it, and then we'll a few more keynotes, then we'll end. I don't know, 12:30, 12:45. But before we stand up, before we sing this Kinnot, Kinnot Lamed Aleph, about the contrasting leaving Egypt, Mitzrayim, and leaving Yerushalayim. It intensifies the grief. Both Tisha B'Av and Pesach have a mitzvah of sipur. You have to tell the story over. So it's interesting in this Kinnot that it doesn't focus on where we are going or where we are coming from. We depart from Mitzrayim, not where we're arriving in Israel. We depart from Yerushalayim. This past year, before I tell a story, but when Hurricane Harvey ravaged Houston. So Rabbi Barry Gelman, who's a rabbi in a shul in Houston, so he was sending out daily updates, and he wrote at one point he wrote, "I've been roaming around the community, visiting the flooded families, cleaning out the shul, taking stock of our needs over and over again. Love is winning. I am reminded of Eish Kad Bekirbi." The text takes us on an emotional journey between the pain of exile from Jerusalem and the ecstasy of leaving Egypt. The back and forth is Jewish history and human life. And the end of the Kinnot, Shuvi Yerushalayim, represents the greatest high of all moments, the ultimate overcoming of all difficulties. And one of the things about this Kinnot is that things can change in an instant. Things can change drastically in an instant, and things can change, for the better in an instant. And redemption, the Kalev Rebbe stories about changing, the Shema Yisrael stories can change also drastically. So we'll stand up, we'll say Eish Kad Bekirbi, and then we'll say a few more Kinnots.
Eish Kad Bekirbi Balosi Alivi B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Ekenim Oira Liman Askira B'Tzeisi Mirushalayim Az Yashir Moshe Shir Lo Yinashe B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Eikonen Yirmiyah Ben Aneni B'Tzeisi Mirushalayim Beisi Yiskona Mishachana Ana B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Hamas Ajala Alai Kanana B'Tzeisi The Yamsuf Gala Yamram V'Karachom Makam B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Zeinim Shatafu V'Arosh Shitafu Ayim Mitzrayim Ano Moririm Mayim Hamarim B'Tzeisi Hashkem Haarev Seviv Osacho Tzeisi Mitzrayim Kore Elevel Al Naros Bavel B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Arekot The fun I B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Cherev L'Tusha L'Tevach L'Tusha Tzeisi Yerushalayim Zevach Min Rav Hashem and Amish Tzeisi Mitzrayim Segulas Elekucha Katzam Nativcha B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Chagim V'Shvasos V'Mofesim V'Yosos B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Tanis V'Eivel Ridof HaHevel B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Tovim Ovalim L'Arba Digalim B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Lishmeilim Machanos Areilim B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Yovel U'Shmita V'Eretz Shoketa B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Olor L'Tzmisos L'Charos L'Chrisos B'Tzeisi Kaporas V'Yaron V'Avnei Sikaron B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Avnei Akela Uchlei Abela B'Tzeisi Yerushalayim Leviim V'Aharonim Shvim Zekenim B'Tzeisi Mitzrayim Nuksim Amonim Mochrin Vikonim Vitzeisim Moshe Yireh Yov Aaron Yanchein Vitzeisim Mitzrayim Nebuchadnezzar Adron Nuskeisar Vitzeisim Naro Cham Avadon Aisham Vitzeisim Mitzrayim Rachak Mimenu V'Inei Yanenu Vitzeisim Yerushalayim Sisrei Paro Ches V'Sidrei Ma'arech Ches Seimi Mitzrayim Iman Yitzeches Alai Soveres Vitzeisim Olos Zorchem V'Yishen Nechochem Vitzeisim Mitzrayim Erev Dukarim Mitzion Ayikarim Vitzeisim Yem Epatim Mitzrayim Sringos Usruos the cause Ruach Hatzon Vitzeisim Yerushalayim Rina Yeshua V'Chatzarot Hashru Vitzeisim Mitzrayim Torah Sudakle Thomasim Continue with the Kinnot. We'll skip ahead a little bit to Kinnot Lamed Vav, the Kinnot of Tzion Hala Tishali, a very, very important Kinnot. Already, the Ramah tells us as we get towards closer to Chatzos, we're supposed to end with the types of Nechama. The Art Scroll can be found on page 328. The most of the Kinnos are about destruction. As you get to the end of the Kinnot, so things begin to change a little bit. This Kinnot, Kinnot Lamed Vav, is written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, the great author of the Kuzari. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is born in Spain in 1080. He's a wonderful poet. He writes some of our Zmiros, Yom Shabboson. The Rashba, who lived later, called the Yehuda Halevi the Rosh HaMisharim V'Chashivus V'Ma'ala, our chief poet in significance and skill. As magnum opus, obviously, is the Kuzari. And what's important here in this Kinnot, that we have a job in the last part of Kinnos. We've talked about Yerushalayim and its destruction, but we also talk about what Yerushalayim looks like in its beauty. And Rabbi Soloveitchik would talk about that we have to see Tzion b'churbana, but Tzion b'vinyana, not just in what it was destroyed, but in its beauty. It's necessary. You have to, in order to appreciate you know, Tzion and this coming back, that is something we have to. You know, we have already there's an earthquake in Sfat and it killed thousands of people. And he wrote a eulogy, and in this eulogy he writes that we can't be. May it be your will that our sense of gratitude to him for restoring Yerushalayim to our hands may not be dulled by the awareness of those who head away and need not wait another 40 years to witness the next much-awaited step of the Shekhinah. What he's talking about is that we can't forget that we have this whole land of Israel, especially Yerushalayim. So when we get to the last part of Kinnos, it's important that we reflect not just on how bad it was, but we also reflect on how good it is, and how good it was, and how good again, it will be. I believe that when we mourn, for Israel, for Yerushalayim, so to speak, when we mourn, which we all do, we put on ashes at a wedding, we sit on the floor today, right? We're doing all of these mourning. There's two ways that we mourn. We mourn that I'm just really sad. I'm really sad, so therefore I'm not gonna do certain things. I'm gonna do certain things. But we also can anticipate the rebuilding. Now, there was a great debate that was raged already back 1,000 years, the 1100s, a debate about breaking the glass at a wedding. Everybody breaks the glass at the wedding. So some of Rishonim said they don't want to do it. It's baltashchis. They're going to break the glass. What are we really accomplishing? All right, this debate raged on for many years. And today, you have it today. Some poskim say not to do it. There are some people who are, when, I don't know, maybe your kids got married and you got married, your Messiah or Kedushin had you break it during the singing because, so the truth is just easier, okay? Do it afterwards. But Rishonim wrote that we should leave it the way it is because it's not that I'm really, really sad. Okay, all right, now I'm going to go dance. No, that's not the point. The point is that when we can either just be sad or we can anticipate rebuild of Yerushalayim and rebuilding of Israel. So when I break that glass, what I do is, in fasting, the Pri Megadim says you don't use ceramic, you can't use pottery, you can't bring a mug. Number one, because you can't break that with your foot. But also, ceramic can't get re-glued together. Right? So it's not ultimate destruction, it's something that's going to be rebuilt. So Shlomo Zalman says that I want to live my life, and I want to live my life with the anticipation of rebuilding Yerushalayim. So when I break the glass, it's my matir. It's what allows me now to have the rest of my wedding. Not that there's two separate parts. There's like dancing wedding, sadness part of the wedding. No, it's part of it. If I want to joyous and be happy, so before I do that, I have an allowance. I'm going to make sure that is part of my simcha celebration. I remember that I want to rebuild Yerushalayim. Not in the middle of Meshkachech and then finish it, because I don't want to, they don't stim together. That's the better way to do it. And I think that as we say this Kinnot, there is so much today that we can look to Israel and look at the rebuilding and to look at what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has provided for us. And we should hope that what we have shouldn't just be the ultimate of what we have, that it should continue, that we should see ultimately the real true Tzion B'Vinyana. Right? Tkina Lamevot, Tzion Ala Tishalei.